See, Ann Brady said she was not going to be here till about 9:15. I think she had a morning meeting. So we're still missing a few. Give it another minute or two. Bruce, are you in Canada or down here?
Canada.
Canada.
Yeah. Otherwise, I would have come to the meeting there.
We felt your spirit.
Mhm.
Yeah, sounds like it.
I couldn't, how many people showed up for the meeting?
Oh, it was a full house. It was just jammed. I don't know, David, you got any crowd up? I mean, people, all the seats were more than taken. There were people standing around all the edges of the room and.
Yeah,
Well over 100, maybe up to 200. I don't know. Hard to tell.
yeah,
Public comment went on for an hour and a half.
wow. What time did it come up on the agenda? What
Uh,
time did it
I'll
start?
give a report.
Yeah, that David will give a report on what happened.
Okay, all right.
We don't know how many were watching on TV, right?
No, we don't.
I don't know. It's from what I saw at all the local TV stations, I think, covered it.
No,
Yeah.
there was Lee County TV,
Oh,
where you could watch it on YouTube, which is what I was doing.
Mhm.
Good morning.
Good morning.
hi, Sandy.
Morning, Sandy.
Okay, well, I think we can get started. Welcome everyone to a special meeting of the Captiva Community Panel. Purpose of this meeting is to evaluate what happened at the commissioners' meetings and obtain everybody's perspectives on the meaning of what happened and see if we can start to develop some next steps. So with that, I'll start a roll call. David Mintz,
I am here. Thank you.
Tony Lappy,
I'm here.
okay, Linda Laird,
Here,
Marguerite Maville. Hopefully Marguerite will join us soon. John Jensen.
No,
She's
Marguerite is
I'm
here.
Oh, she is here?
Yeah.
I'm
Yes.
sorry, Marguerite. Okay.
Long way, but
John Jensen,
Here, Jay.
Bob Walter.
Here, good morning.
Hey, hi, Bob. Ken Gill,
Here.
Ann Brady notified me she would be joining our meeting approximately 9:15. Bruce McDonald
Yep, here.
and Sandy Stillwell.
here.
Okay, well, we're all here. That's great. David Ken Gooderham, do you want to start us off with what happened at the meeting? Give us a review.
Well, let me sort of take it from our last panel meeting.
Okay.
As everybody know, we passed a motion at the last panel meeting. And then subsequent to the motion, Jay issued an open letter to the community and commissioners consistent with the motion. And that went out. And then we scheduled a meeting with the 5 commissioners. And I say we scheduled, it was the combination of the Captiva Community Panel, the Captiva Civic Association, SCCF, and the various the 12 associations, homeowners associations, and condominium associations, their representative at South Seas. So it was basically 4 organizations that met with the 5 commissioners. We actually met with 4 of them in person, and we had numerous conversations with Commissioner Ruane, our District 1 Commissioner. When we met with the 5 commissioners, we basically discussed the proposed ordinance that was subject to the June 20th hearing. And we went through a number of factors with them. I will tell you, they gave us a significant amount of time, all of them. And we discussed with them the extent of the opposition to the proposed motion as it was currently proposed. At that point, we had a coalition that ran from SCCF to the Chamber of Commerce and to homeowners associations and to nonprofit organizations and to most of the businesses on Captiva and many of them on Sanibel and the Sanibel City Council. I mean, it was a level of opposition that I think was unprecedented at the county level, and that it occurred so quickly and with so much passion, I think took everyone by surprise, particularly the county. And then we walked through with each of the commissioners the problems that we had with the proposed amendment as it was written. And we went through it basically in our resolution that we passed at the last panel meeting, which is basically that the proposed ordinance, without any consultation with the panel or the community, was eliminating the height restrictions on Captiva, which we had changed in 2012 and included 28 feet above base flood elevation. What we found out during this process is that the Captiva code provision, which permitted 28 feet above base flood elevation in our code, was mistyped, had typos in the county prepared ordinance, and basically didn't recognize that we had 28 feet above base flood elevation, but drafted it in a way that someone could interpret it as 28 feet above grade, as opposed to incorporating base flood elevation. It was just an error. I don't know. No one understands how that error could take place, but it might have led to some confusion because there was, when we discussed this issue with our county commissioners, they did not understand fully that our current Captiva code incorporated 28 feet above base flood elevation. In other words, we changed our code to incorporate the ability to build up with no upward limit, so that as you build up in relation to base flood elevation, you can keep going higher. They did not understand that. And so,
Okay, and David, just to make sure we're all 100% clear, that's 28 feet above base flood elevation where it exists at your home. And if somebody changes base flood elevation, that changes the height that you're permitted to go, right?
absolutely. And what the proposed ordinance did is, instead of 28 feet above base flood elevation, changed it to 35 feet above the base flood elevation to make it consistent with Lehigh Acres and other places, which made no sense for Captiva. But I think part of the problem was I think people didn't understand that we had already incorporated base flood elevation. In fact, we had done it, one of the first communities to do that. And so we talked that through with the commissioners, and I think that was important. And the other thing we talked through with them was the fact that without having a plan from South Seas that was proposed to anyone, and there were no discussions with South Seas, not even with the homeowners associations or the condo associations on South Seas. What the proposed ordinance was doing was exempting South Seas from existing height limitations on Captiva and exempting South Seas from existing density limitations with respect to hotel rooms. And what resonated with the county commissioners is that these proposals, these exemptions for South Seas, removing them from the Captiva Code and from all the other regulations that apply to the other resorts and hotels and property owners on Captiva, was creating a special benefit for one property owner. And that did not sit well in some of the discussions we had. They couldn't quite understand how that got in there. So we had those discussions. They were very detailed discussions with the commissioners, really two aspects of it: the details of what the plan proposed and the extent of the community opposition and the failure to consult with anyone in the community. And they all received a letter from the fire department on Captiva, which said, because there was no consultation, people didn't understand that they didn't have the equipment to deal with fires at a greater height than the Captiva Code presently permits. And therefore it would be additional taxpayers expense of $1.65 million if they decided to amend that code. And that was just another example of why the failure to consult created issues that did not have to be dealt with at that point, and why there was so much anxiety and confusion. So anyway, we talked about what we do at that point, and we had consistent with our motion, asked the commissioners to basically vote no on this proposal and go back to the drawing boards, or go back to start all over and rethink how you do this and consult the various stakeholders on the community, which are, now we know, are extensive stakeholders. And it was unclear from the meetings whether or not they would support a continuance, meaning postponing a decision on this to some time in the future, or whether they would reject it outright. During the course of those meetings, we also had representative from SCCF explain the environmental impacts of raising building heights or increasing density on Captiva, and that was discussed fairly thoroughly. Anyway, so we left those meetings feeling somewhat encouraged that the county commissioners understood that this was much more complex and raised so many more issues than they had understood, and were recognized that these issues were significant to the future of the two islands, Sanibel and Captiva. And I think when we left those meetings, we felt fairly confident that something would happen, and that thing wouldn't get passed on June 20th. At one of the last meetings we had was with Commissioner Greenwell, and he voluntarily said he was willing to make a motion to extend the time, postpone this thing, and extend the time for people to better understand it and for the stakeholders to be involved and for more consultation. And he initially suggested that maybe we just move it to, and he asked the county attorney. The county attorney was at some of our meetings with the commissioners, and he asked the county attorney when they come back from recess, and they were looking sometime in August, I think August 15th and August 16th. And we basically said to that commissioner that we appreciate you willing to make that motion, but doesn't give us very much time. And but we couldn't push it much further than that, because when we started this thing, everybody thought this was just going to sail through on June 20th. And now we were coming away with these meetings based on the community reaction. And it was clear that we were going to get some sort of continuance. And so anyway, we left that meeting, and then we went to the public hearing. And for those of you who weren't there, I can tell you as Jay mentioned, the place was packed. People were prepared to speak. They filled out cards and there was a public hearing, number 2 on the public hearing, which would occur later in the June 20th meeting, probably sometime around 10:30 or 11. But right at the outset of the meeting, after we've done a bunch of sort of presentations that the commissioners do, including bringing up a dog, the pet of the month, and all that kind of stuff, It was a cute dog, but it's still, yeah, 200 people. And paying a month wasn't the most important thing on their mind. But in any, there were a lot of nice presentations. And before the meeting started, Commissioner Greenwell made a motion to basically postpone the public hearing, which was scheduled later in the agenda. He made a motion to postpone it until sometime in August. I think it was August 15th or 16th. At that point, Commissioner Ruane, as the District 1 Commissioner, our Commissioner, made a second on that motion, but asked that the motion be amended. And he asked that it be amended to after Labor Day, September 5th and 6th. The reason I'm saying 5th and 6th is because there was the changes in the land development code, and then to make the land development code changes, they also had to change our Captiva plan to remove the building heights, and that was the next day. So the proposed postponement or continuance was to eliminate or postpone both hearings, both the public hearing scheduled for the 20th and for the plan amendment scheduled for the 21st. Anyway, so Commissioner Ruane made the motion to move it to September 5th and 6th. And there was some discussion among the board members after he made the second. And it was pretty, and the Commissioner Greenwell accepted Commissioner Ruane's amendment. And then there was discussion among the various board members, commissioners, and it was clear at that point that they were all going to agree to the continuance through till after Labor Day, which was, I must say, everybody breathed a sigh of relief, because this was scheduled to get approved on the 20th. And now it was clear to everybody in the audience that this was going to have at least a continuance until September 5th and 6th. And during the course of discussion, and I'm not sure exactly what time it took place, the chairman, Commissioner Hammond, basically said, he said two things. First off, that we need to start over, that the process was not done correctly. There was no consultation. And he used the word, we need to start over. We need to review all of this and have a fresh start. He also asked the county attorney, he didn't understand why the South Seas amendments, the amendments that just applied to South Seas, were in this ordinance with all other resiliency things that may be necessary but don't really affect Captiva. He didn't understand why the South Seas piece was in here. He understood that they were asking for some special exceptions, and he basically asked the county attorney if he could bifurcate the South Seas issue out of this ordinance. And the county attorney said he would review that, but he didn't have an answer at that point. So then after the motion was seconded, there was some discussion among the county commissioners. They opened it up to public hearing. And I will tell you, it went on for an hour and a half. The remarks were incredibly intelligent, except for maybe mine and James Evans, but everybody else's remarks were very intelligent. They were very respectful. They were succinct, and they were clear in what they were saying. They were saying they expected this ordinance to address resiliency, and they wanted everybody to be resilient on Sanibel, on Captiva. They would support changes that would allow for resiliency, but they were unified in their voiced opposition to increasing heights that have nothing to do with resiliency, building heights that have nothing to do with resiliency, and were clearly against increasing density, which they saw as the opposite of resiliency at this point after suffering through a hurricane. And I can tell you that testimony from everyone in the room was consistent. It was absolutely consistent. There was one voice, one speaker who disagreed with that out of the hour and a half, and that was the Greg Spencer representing South Seas. and he was the first speaker, but other than that, I will tell you, there was not a voice that didn't basically offer those principles, which was, we want resiliency. We don't want increased density or increased heights that aren't related to resiliency. And that was basically what took place. After the public hearing, which I think the commissioners were extremely impressed with, they voted on the motion to postpone this matter until September 5th and September 6th. During that vote, it was clear from the commissioners that they wanted to have meetings between county staff and all the stakeholders being SCCF, the community panel, which they mentioned repeatedly, CCA, the associations on South Seas, Sanibel City Council. The Sanibel City Council was extremely well represented at that public hearing. We had the mayor, the assistant deputy mayor, and another member of the city council, Holly Smith, Mike Miller. It started off with Richard Johnson. They were all extremely clear about what they were saying. And so I think coming out of that public hearing, there were, I guess I would call it principles that came out that I think we can talk about in a little while. But I think there are principles that are almost self-evident coming out of the public hearing that we can apply to how we want to go forward. And so anyway, I can go through what I think those principles are. And I drafted a sort of list of next steps, which we can talk about also, because I think those next steps can be culled from the discussions that were taking place with the county commissioners publicly, with our discussions with the county commissioners privately, and with some of the discussions we had with staff privately. So I think there is a pathway here. I think there are principles that we can apply, and I think we can keep the community engaged, and I think we can have a positive outcome here. So anyway, that's where we are in terms, Jay, of sort of reporting what took place. And I think what we can talk about next are what I would call principles and next steps.
David, thanks for that very complete and concise summary of everything that's happened. I've been here along the way, and I think your summary is 100% accurate, regarding all of the key events and what happened. Before we talk about next steps, there's one thing I would like to make sure I understand, and that is that South Seas is claiming that with the current building heights that they are subjected to, they cannot rebuild, certain properties. They put out a letter just before the panel meeting the day before, explaining that, for example, Land's End, they used an example with Land's End that Land's End would lose 2 stories of height. Is that just completely bogus, or is there any possibility at all that they cannot build back to their present height levels, and that they actually have to have these, or is it really just boiled down to, if they want to be more profitable, they want to add a 3rd story? But are there any legitimate reasons why they need changes so that they can build back to where they were pre-hurricane?
I can address it. I know, I didn't know if Ken wanted to address that first, but I certainly can address it.
Well, either of you, whatever.
Well, if you can hear me okay, I'll give my 2 cents.
Wait, okay, wait a second, Ken. That's Ken Suarez. Let's just do with the panel for a second, okay?
Go ahead, David. You can start. I'll jump in if there's something.
Okay. The and then I want to hear from Ken Suarez first, but it's what South Seas has done has been a little confusing and to people, and I understand why. Just so we're clear, for example, Jay, South Seas and Timbers has nothing to do with Land's End.
Yeah, right, I know that.
And so what they're doing, and they really have nothing to do with the properties they own. What they're doing is talking about build back provisions of Bayside Villas and Tennis Villas and Land's End, et cetera, et cetera. And part of what they're doing is based on an obsolete provision in the Land Development Code, which the staff did not update when we updated our building heights on Captiva. So they keep referencing, Jay, a provision in the Land Development Code, which really doesn't exist anymore. It exists there, but it's out of date and it needs to be updated consistent with our updated Land Development Code for Captiva.
David, can I ask a question? Is it there or is it not there?
I'm
In
sorry?
the LDC, is it there or not there in the LDC right now?
It
You
is.
said it's there, but it's obsolete.
That's right, because, and I'll explain it right now. That provision of the LDC, which is not the Captiva Code, has the building heights that existed in Chapter 34 before Chapter 33, which is the Captiva Code, was amended to incorporate base flood elevation. Under that provision, which is obsolete, if Jay Brown's house,
But it's in the Captiva, I mean, it's in the LDC right now. That's all I'm asking. I
is
understand
in the
you're implying
LDC.
it's obsolete. but
Bob,
in the
it's in, but it's in conflict. We amended the LDC, so ours would take precedent, but they did not remove the old language. So yes,
Okay.
it's there, but it's in conflict with our language.
and
And we would have to, it should have been removed at the time we did our amendments. It wasn't.
But everything
Okay.
we're referencing in this entire conversation is the LDC, correct?
Correct.
Okay,
Bob,
thank you.
and the staff recognized, I spoke to the staff recognized that that provision should have been updated with ours. So that reference to that provision, if that provision was not, because it wasn't in theory, if Jay's house, which is completely in conformity with the Captiva Code, if his house was destroyed under that provision, he couldn't rebuild it because it contains the old 35 foot above grade and 40 foot above sea level building heights that doesn't incorporate base flood elevation. So that provision has now been recognized by the staff, and we knew it before. It didn't come into play because it was irrelevant, but it's an obsolete, inconsistent, out of date provision. And to rely on that for anything is just a waste of time at this point, because our Chapter 33 trumps it and is more current and should have been fixed. But let's just leave that aside, okay? So under the administrative interpretation of South Seas, it has building heights. And it says these standard building heights, which are not our Captiva Code, they're pre-existing ones, they're 35 feet and 42 feet,
Right.
don't incorporate base flood and elevation. But it says these standards are applicable, meaning the old building heights are applicable to all new structures except those being replaced under the existing Lee County build back provision of the Land Development Code. Okay, so in the administrative interpretation, it basically says you can build back under the Land Development Code, under the existing build back provisions of the Land Development Code. So there's no specific limitations in the administrative interpretation against building back on South Seas. Okay, so then we have to move into the Land Development Code. And there are very extensive Land Development Code build back provisions that apply throughout Lee County. And in principle, what they do is they basically say if you have damage less than 50% of the value of your buildings, you can build back without really meeting the new current codes if you were new construction.
Right,
50% rule. If you have more than 50% damage to your home based on the cost of your building, then you can build back. And we want you to build back, but you have to incorporate the new building codes as if you were new construction, which means base flood elevation or whatever it is. And there are two basic provisions that outline that, yes, the principle is to build back either your existing structure without having to meet new current codes if you're less than 50%. And if you're more than 50% damage, you got to build back to the new current code.
right. Understand that.
But the idea is, yes, the county wants you to build back, which you had. And it is our position, meaning it's always been the panel's position, and it's my personal position, is that we should, and I think this is what the Resiliency Task Force is saying, we want to make sure everybody can build back to what they had while incorporating whatever resiliency measures are required by the state, the federal, or local jurisdictions. And if that means more height to incorporate those resiliency options, the answer is yes, we want to incorporate that. But that's for build back. So the answer is the county position at this point is to permit build back. There is one provision that South Seas is quoting, which basically says to expedite build back, there's an emergency review board, and that emergency review board could eliminate setback requirements, parking requirements, other kinds of requirements to expedite build back, which is the intent of the county, but they don't want to, they don't have the authority to expedite that if it's exceeding the building height regulations in the specific areas of Lee County that have specific building height regulations. And then they go back to that provision that I told you is obsolete, and they refer to that for the expediting process. And that provision is not a current provision. And so that provision does have to be amended, in my view, because it should have been amended back in 2012 because it's obsolete. But it should be amended to make it clear two things: that we have different building heights on Captiva, and also the Captiva code. The Captiva code, as we sit here today, has a provision that says non-conforming buildings that are non-conforming as of way back when, I think it's 1982, or any of those buildings can be built back as a non-conforming building. In other words, they could all be built back consistent to what they had before. So in answer to your question, Jay, there needs to be some amendments to the code on the build back provisions so that it is clear that all resiliency options could be incorporated into build back, including the provision that South Seas is citing that's obsolete.
Okay, so are you saying, David, just to be abundantly clear, there does need to be changes so that South Seas can build back to 2 stories?
No.
It doesn't. Okay, I
There
guess.
needs
So
I thought you said that there did need to be some changes.
no, there needs to be changes. Right now, the administrative interpretation doesn't yet incorporate our new building heights on South Seas.
Right.
So there has to be a way that the administrative interpretation is brought up to date, consistent with our code.
Right.
if it's brought up to date, consistent with our code, which we've always said should be done,
Right.
then South Seas can right now on their property, in other words, where
No, I
the,
understand that. I'm just asking the way the language is written now. There
Jay,
are important limitations on South Seas that need
Jay,
to be.
there's the problem
No,
is the way
it-
the way the language is written now, it is not 100% clear. That
Okay,
needs to be amended. The intent of the build back ordinance was to let people build back what they had
right.
existent.
I understand that.
And that's been expressed throughout. The trouble is when it came to heights, there is some vague language in there that could be construed as a problem. In the original intent, that wasn't the case, but we do recognize that we should go back and make that more clear in this. It's something that the staff never dealt with. I don't know why. So I think legally you could certainly make a strong case that they could get what they have now. But
Yes,
if we can clarify the language, it would eliminate any fears or misunderstandings.
okay.
but let me make something very clear. What the proposed ordinance does now is not amend, clarify the build back.
No,
provision.
I know that, David. I know that. I was just
Yeah,
trying to clarify, the accuracy of these statements that South Seas has been making.
right. But, and the proposed ordinance change that South Seas is making is not to clarify the build back provision.
No, I know that. Yeah,
But to permit them to build higher for new construction.
right.
And that's what they were asking for. Right now, just so we're clear, if they were governed by our existing Captiva code, in other words, if the administrative interpretation is updated, which I believe our code allows them to do through an administrative process, even without a public hearing, actually. But if they updated their administrative interpretation to accept, to comply with our Captiva code, the South Seas properties, leave aside the association's properties, the South Seas properties, the 140 units could be built at 28 feet above base flood elevation.
Right.
And the hotel units down by the big marina could be built at 28 feet above base flood
Right,
elevation.
well, that's what I'm just trying to be 100% sure of, that with current regulations, South Seas can build back to where they are now.
I say,
And you're saying that
yes,
you think that, that's the way it should
No.
be interpreted now, but it should be clarified so that make it absolutely clear they can build back to where they are now.
It is written now in a way which we cannot build back, David. You just said that 10 times. We need to amend
no,
in order for it to be.
what I'm saying, Bob, is that what South Seas sought to do is basically remove itself.
No, that's not the question, David.
just talking
What's
height.
South Seas intent to do?
Pardon me?
The question is, with what we have now, can South Seas build back? I'm not moving on to what South Seas wants. I'm just trying to make 100% sure that South Seas can build back, to 2 stories or 28 feet, the way it is written now. And the way I understood you to say is, you think yes, but it needs to be clarified.
I think that there are 2 things that need to be clarified. One is they have to make the administrative interpretation, which has nothing to do with the Captiva code, They have to get compliant with the Captiva code. That's number 1.
Okay,
And number 2, what they have to do is basically amend the obsolete provision so that build back provisions, they can build back exactly what they have. And that's because there's an obsolete provision in there that has to be fixed. But yes, but that has nothing to do with what South Seas asked for in their proposed amendment.
no, right. Okay,
So David, can I ask you a question, David? It's Bruce here.
Sure.
So I think I understand what you're saying. Can you just clarify these 2 conflicting things? One I think is in section chapter 33 and one's in chapter 34. And it's unclear in the language which one to take precedent. But in the case of anybody that's built a new home since 2012, when we introduced the new Captiva change, wouldn't they all have been in violation of this I'll say obsolete section.
Yes.
So
All the permits that were approved, all the houses that were built would be in violation of this section because the county permitting and community development.
thank you.
The 33, not chapter 30.
So for the last 10 years, we've been following the Captiva code, not this obsolete section.
That's
That is
not completely accurate. The new language was put in 2018 and it has been followed since then.
Okay, sorry.
And the stuff in 2012 was built to the old language, and the new houses that have been built since 2018 have reflected the 28
Okay.
feet above base flood elevation. The conflict is when
Okay,
we-
so for
when-
the last, so just to be clear, for the last 5 years, despite the fact that we've had this contradictory language, we've operated under the current Captiva 28 feet above base flood level guidelines.
of all the things that were brought to the panel, yes, they all reflected the 28 feet above base flood.
Thank you.
But he's asking about all the things that were built, and the answer is yes. All the things that were built were under the new Captiva code.
Okay. So I'm
South
just
Seas
raising
is
that because
governed
I
by
think
the
it's an
ADD
important,
though,
I
correct?
think it's an
Right.
important point
South
because
Seas is-
Bob, you're saying that's not the case.
No,
South
Bruce,
Seas is governed by the ADD.
South Seas has its own set of rules that were instituted in 2002, which are the 3542 height rules. Those never changed. When we changed the Captiva language, it changed everything but South Seas because they were already under the administrative interpretation.
And apparently the LDC, it didn't change that.
Well, that's a different issue. That's staff error. But the bigger problem for South Seas is that the administrative interpretation was established in 2002 and was not amended because it could not be amended simply when we changed the LDC, it didn't change the administrative interpretation. So there are two sets of standards on Captiva today. South Seas has 3542. Everybody else has either 28 feet over base flood elevation or 3542, whichever is the least restrictive. Another piece of vague wordsmithing that we ought to amend at some point, but that was done for different reasons.
Okay, so
That's the confusion.
the net is though, is there needs to be some clarification in writing these things if South, to make sure South Seas can build back to where it is now, to make it
Yes.
abundantly clear.
Yes, because the build back clause provision allows for an emergency review board to make changes to allow you to build back to the same density and intensity you had before the storm. But the height language is not clear enough. They say on one section, they say you can do whatever you want, or you get back what you want. In the other section, they say, but you may have to abide by other rules. We think that it would make more sense to go back to the original intent of the build back clause, which was to say, if you had it now, you get it back with the exception of the state and federal rules that the county have no control over, which means you have to go higher in some instances because of base flood.
But the rules they're referring to that Ken just mentioned is the rule that we know, as Bruce mentioned, is the outdated provision. So that's why it's got to be cleared up. They're referencing an outdated provision, and we need to clear that up. But that's under the build back provisions, and there were no amendments in the proposed ordinance that had anything to do with build back provision.
That's also kind of pointing up why we need to go back and look at the entire land development code, or at least as much of it as affects Captiva, and look for all the resiliency issues that are there. Staff was directed to do that, and at least from what we've seen so far, did not. We need to go look at some of these things like build back and make sure that it is as clear as we can possibly make it, not only for Captiva, but frankly for the entire coastal community in Lake County.
Can we make a statement that the panels, that we understand that there have been some problems, whatever. But here is the panel's intent, and here's what we will be working with the county to ensure in code, and write out exactly what that is, such that South Seas can use it, such that everyone else can use it, and fight about if we don't like that, rather than all of these intermediate points.
I think that There are a number of principles that came out of that public hearing and discussion with the commissioners. I think one of them was to maintain the height and density rules for all of Captiva. And the associations, the 12 associations on South Seas are part of Captiva, an important part of Captiva. So we want to maintain those 28 feet above base flood elevation and density rules, which is 3 units per acre, including hotels for all of Captiva. But then 2, we want to guarantee that the build back provisions allow what owners had, plus incorporating base flood elevation and all state and federal resiliency requirements that may require more height. That's the second principle. We want everybody to be able to build back, incorporating all the new resiliency measures. And then we want and Captiva and South Seas people, including Ken Suarez and his organizations and South Seas Timbers, will have to get together and agree to amend their administrative interpretation to be compliant with the Captiva code. That process already exists. There is a provision in the existing Captiva code that allows them to amend any PUD or PD to be consistent with the Captiva code. They just have to request it, and they have to get their act together to do that. And there may need to be some legal clarity in terms of the administrative interpretation on who can make that request, because that administrative interpretation may reflect some negotiations that took place between the associations and the previous owners of South Seas Resort piece. But there is.
Was the answer yes, David? To my question?
Yeah, the answer is yes. That,
okay. I think
But I don't think he's saying to put it out right now. It's just a single.
well, it means we
statement.
need to develop it and write it down and say, this is what we support. And this is what the panel's position is. And if you want to, and yes, we may take a while to get there, and we can argue about 34 versus 33 versus whatever, but let's argue about our desired state, not whatever historical place we are in.
Okay, I think there are 3 quick things. Yes, we want to maintain our height and density limitations in the code. We want to have build back provisions that are completely incorporate the resiliency requirements, height, et cetera, that'll make these buildings resilient. And we want the South Seas administrative interpretation of PD to be able to be compliant with the Captiva code and those build back provisions. Very simple.
Okay, so we can write that down and say, this is what we want. And then we can actually talk to other people and get concurrence or argue about these 3 things, right?
Well, but
Right.
I think there's other things too, that there's other principles that we have to.
Yeah, but these are sort of the big ones, I thought.
Well, density is a huge one.
Well, we can, okay, then, okay.
Well, that's what we're saying. The first thing we're saying, and going to maintain existing height and density rules for all Captiva properties. That's what we have in our code now. So that's number 1. Number 2, we want build back for any buildings that aren't within our that are taller than our existing code permits. We want them to be able to build them back and to incorporate any resiliency measures necessary, including base flood elevation, to make them resilient. And then we want South Seas to work with its associations to amend their administrative interpretation to be compliant with the build back provisions and the Captiva code so that they will be treated like everybody else. Those are very simple rules that everybody who spoke at the public hearing supported.
Okay, so I think we should write them down and have all of us have those. And we should also be talking with various groups and say that this is what we want. If you can agree to it, we're all, if we can't, that's a different issue.
Well, but there's a lot of other things we want too, Linda. So
Okay,
I don't want to start advocating yet till we know, until we're.
I would like that part written down at least. And I would also, and if we don't want to do that, I would like to go back to the meeting because I have some comments about the meeting and thoughts about the meeting. And is now the time to do it or to wait?
Well, let me just summarize what I think I've learned from this whole process in terms of the process that we're talking about right now. I think the three principles are self-evident at this point. I think that we can draft for the panel a revised ordinance. In other words, change what the county has proposed and incorporate language, draft language, initial draft language that reflects those principles consistent with what Linda just said. I think we can do that by the July meeting. I think we should also retain counsel or deal with our existing counsel just to make sure that we're being absolutely right in some of these drafts, and I'm convinced we would be. And then I would take that initial draft, and meet with all our stakeholders in the coalition, everybody who's been part of this process, and get their input. I think we could meet with, and that would include the South Seas organizations, et cetera, et cetera. I think we meet with county staff. We meet with Commissioner Ruane because he had some ideas about meetings on Sanibel and Captiva. We can meet with Timbers if they would like about these principles. And then once we get that all finalized, we get everybody on board. We have a draft ordinance that reflects those principles that county staff has seen, that the commissioners have seen, that Timbers have seen. We meet with the commissioners. We revise the draft ordinance changes so that it reflects everything that the stakeholders and our principals meet. And then we get some final community approval of that and present it to the county before September 5th. That's basically the process. It would involve everybody. It would give something that we can work off of. We can amend it as we go. We can clarify it as we go. We can get legal input as we go. Nobody's wedded to any of it, but we know generally what the principles are. Keep everybody the same on treat everybody the same on Captiva, allow for full resiliency and build back, and get everybody involved to support this. That seems pretty simple. And once you get through this process and you fight your way through it, it becomes pretty clear and I think pretty easy to do this.
Okay, so
Yeah.
that's your plan going forward. I'd still like to go back and talk about the meeting a little bit.
Sure.
I was concerned about the city attorney's comments and the feeling from some of the commissioners that this is just a misunderstanding. And what I heard too is we'll go back and talk. Okay, I am overstating this for emphasis. We'll just go out to Captiva. We'll talk to them. We'll listen to everybody. Everybody will feel better because we listen to them. And then we'll go off and do what we want to do because that's what we're going to do. And listening to the city attorney, that is what was being said. Also, even though Hammond may have said the need to start over and why were there South Seas amendments or separating those out, I didn't hear any direction to anybody to do anything other than talk to us. And that concerns me. So why do we believe any of this? I mean, other than being nice people.
I think those are legitimate questions. I think there is for the commissioners who don't understand Captiva or even Sanibel because they don't live here, I think there needs to be a lot more education. I think they have to understand. I think the community pressure has to continue and the unity has to be made stronger and more expansive. But you're right. I think if they would have been happy to allow possibly unlimited density and greater heights if there was no opposition. I think that's correct. I think there's still a sentiment there to allow that to happen. And I think your concerns are legitimate. I think we need to engage attorneys to make sure that whatever legal standing we have and whatever legal rights we have we can use. But I think it's not a slam dunk at this point, Linda. All we got is some more time to figure out how to do this in a way that works for everybody.
But I think we also need to,
Can we get?
we cannot wait for staff, or we cannot wait for the county to act. I think the
I
charge,
agree with all that. But
But,
can
let
we
me-
get, go ahead, Ken.
we have an opportunity to make proposal of our language. I think we need to develop that and put it forward so that we have an alternative out there, not just hope that the county will listen and make the changes that we wish they would make. We have to offer them a concrete alternative. And we probably also have to show them that if this is done the way they should have done it, we can get the community behind it, and we can get the support that is necessary, or the political cover they will need to pass it. Because that's what a lot of the commissioners are looking, or politicians. They are looking for a reason not to be voted out of office. So I think if we can do what they should have done in the first place, and give them an alternative that the Captiva community can agree on, assuming we can get to that, I think we can make something different happen. But I also agree with David. It's not a slam dunk. If we sit there and hope and wait that they'll do the right thing, we will get what they're providing now.
Yeah, and I don't think it's just getting the Captiva community. I think based on the public hearing and based on the comments that people made, from Jay to John Lai of the Chamber of Commerce to SCCF, I think we can craft a series of amendments that reflect not just Captiva, but the whole of Sanibel also, and the businesses and all the organizations. And at that point, we have to do everything we can to convince the county commissioners that this is the right thing to do. And that's our job. And I think we take the high road. I think we assume the commissioners will agree with us when they understand it. And we have to fight for that. I don't know what else to say, Linda, but I do think,
Can I try some things?
I think what we're doing is the right thing. And I think that's why we had so much support, because I think we did and said all the right things, and we did it in a fair way, and we want to treat everybody the same fairly.
Okay, a couple more things then. We have there's two board of, whatever, the commissioners meeting. There's a July meeting and an August meeting.
There's no July meeting.
Well, we have one meeting. What can we do to get any kind of commitment from or buy-in from the commissioners to fully looking at an alternative from us and our process?
They've
I mean-
already made a commitment. They've made
What?
they said it. Whether that happens has a lot to do with us, but they've already made that commitment.
I didn't hear that.
Well, Commissioner Ruane wants 2 meetings on Sanibel and 2 meetings on Captiva. He wants to involve all the stakeholders. Commissioner Hammond said we need to start all over, and there was no proper consultation. The process was wrong. They've said that. So we have to, as a panel, take action and do the things that are necessary to make these verbal commitments real in terms of how we proceed. And I think they've said it, and now we have to do it.
What do we need to put on what do we need to get on the August meeting schedule so that we're not surprised in September?
We don't do our next shot to talk to the commissioners in public is September.
We
That's
can't,
what we're,
we can't do anything in August.
well, you can talk to them individually if you wish, but in terms of getting a public hearing, that's been scheduled for September 5th and 6th for the 2 different items.
Is there, I don't know how this government works at all. Other than meeting individually, there's nothing that we can go up to them and talk to them as a group such that we can say, we're working this process, and we have a proposal, and we would like that to be what the hearing is on, not the existing proposal.
That's a discussion we have with staff and then with the individual commissioners, but
Why can't we do that on in August?
Because they have a pretty full agenda and they don't schedule stuff unless you all want to walk in at the end of the meeting and discuss it. The way to deal with this is to develop a proposal, develop our coalition, take it to staff, and then present it to the commissioners. You don't start with the commissioners and go backwards. You need to get staff buy-in on some of these things first.
And then you'd present it in September. We'd have the vote in September. If it doesn't work with SOL.
No,
They would know about it and hear about it long before the September meeting. We would have meetings with the commissioners. We would have meetings with the staff. The community would be on board. We would make sure the community knows about it and speaking publicly about it. We will all be unified, and before it gets to September, and September could get adjourned again. September could be moved to October. It could be moved to November if the commissioners think that that makes more sense, or the staff thinks that makes more sense.
well, they may also want to review. I mean, if we come in with something brand new, they may decide we have to go back through the review process, which would mean the Land Development Advisory Code Committee, or Land Development Code Advisory Committee, sorry, too many C's, and the Executive Regulatory Oversight Committee, and well, I guess those would be the two ones. If those have to be scheduled, that's at least another month, because they only meet once a month and their agendas are often locked in as well. So there's a lot of ifs there. Right now, we have to assume that we will be going to a public hearing in early September and have a proposal prepared with that timeline in mind, but that timeline could change.
Right, but to address Linda's point, we will have our proposal together. We will meet with county staff on it to get their input and see if we can convince them that we want to do is right. And we'll meet with each of the individual commissioners prior to the September 5th meeting. Is that correct?
Yes, and we would have met with all our stakeholders. We would have meetings. We would make sure everybody's on board. We would adjust those proposed draft ordinances based on what people tell us and what we hear. And then we'll go forward and have a position that we want to see adopted in September if the meeting takes place in September. Right.
I have a question.
Sandy, yes.
Yes, I thought I heard David say that because they kind of found the conflict, that it wasn't amended the way it should have been, and some of the language would have been taken out, that they could actually just go in administratively and make that change. And so the question that I have on that one is, if we've set in our plan what we wanted, and if they were to make it so it reflect exactly what we have in the rest of the Captiva plan, and it also now would also include South Seas, and if South Seas was agreeable, that same one would be the same as what we have, is that something that could take care of the issue and forget the 75-foot height? It has to be a public hearing and all that, but could it, for the short term, get them to where they can pull building permits? And is it something that would be acceptable? Because they wouldn't be able to go any higher than what we currently have.
The answer to that is yes.
So is that a good first step? That we
No, I
can-
think the good first step is basically what we're saying, because it's consistent with Sandy says. We get everybody on board with a proposed draft amendments that have to fix what exists, the obsolete provision. We make it clear what it reflects our principles, and we sell it to the staff and the commissioners based on the fact that it's the right thing to do with the community support that we already have.
Because I think we've already made it ourselves perfectly clear that we don't want 75-foot heights. And Greg has said he didn't even ask for that. He was shocked. And any of the plans that they've had, drawn up so far, they're just what they're asking for is just a few more feet. So they
No,
were
Sandy,
wrong.
they're asking for 3 stories where they only have 2 now.
And so
First of
that's,
all, Sandy's correct. No one's asked for 35 feet on our side. Secondly, we have no plan.
Yeah.
We don't know what we can build back. We don't know where we can start. We don't know what we can end with. That's what this whole conversation is about. Everybody keeps saying, show me your plan. We literally have no plan.
Yeah.
Commissioner Ruane said that Greg sat down with him and reviewed his plans.
It's an internal deck that shows the same height that the letter that came out that showed Lands End. We did a similar exercise for beach villas, tennis villas, and bayside villas, which quite frankly are higher than Lands End. There are baysides parking +3. I mean, look at the elevator, 1, 2, 3. And that's all we're asking is parking +3.
So-
In the future of what we're imagining, not what we planned. We can't go plan anything until we know where we can start. And it all started when we were dealing with the hotel and trying to build it back. I mean, I think we made that abundantly clear.
Bob, the problem is, Bob, is that the amendment that was proposed, leaving aside South Seas, it allowed for any developer to come in and ask for any developer on South Seas, not just the Timbers property, but to ask for 75 feet over base flood elevation.
Okay, that's county writing that. We never asked for that. So
Well,
Okay, I understand, but that's what is in the proposed ordinance as we speak
listen,
right
I
now.
think that should be cleared up too. I agree 100%.
Okay,
So do we think, and this is, I'm sure people won't want me to say this, what about us sitting down with South Seas and agreeing to something?
Linda,
I think we should meet with South Seas.
I think we need to clear up this height thing before we can do anything.
Bob, I agree. I think our proposal should allow South Seas to build just like what Twin Waters can build, just like anybody else can build. They should be able to build 2 floors above base flood elevation and wave attenuation or whatever resiliency measures are necessary to do that. And I think for those buildings on South Seas that are non-conforming, such as bayside villas or tennis villas, if they're non-conforming, they should be allowed to build back so that they can incorporate base flood elevation if in the future they suffer a hurricane. We agree with you completely, and we will make amendments to allow that to happen. If you're asking,
Hey, can I just have a clarification though on that? Because I'm not so sure I agree with that. If someone has a 3-story structure that is not in compliant and it's past the 50% rule, it has to be rebuilt. I don't think we're saying they can rebuild 3 stories above base flood elevation, David. I think we're saying we then they could only have 2 stories maybe.
I don't think that's what we're saying, Bruce. I
That's
think,
what it says right now, David.
Yeah,
no, it doesn't.
clearly-
No.
It says 28 feet. You're saying it says 28 feet above BFE on the Captiva code, but in the LDC, it's not.
No, the
So-
LDC still says 35 feet, which you.
But as it's written right now, Bruce is correct.
Well,
Right,
that's why we have to write down, this is what we, the panel, agree.
That is our position, totally.
And maybe everybody will agree with it.
No, but I'm not,
No,
you
no, but I wanted to
misinterpreted what
address
you
Bruce's-
misinterpreted my question. You
hold
I
on,
misinterpreted
let's
my
stop
question.
talking over each other, okay?
Yeah, Bruce, you asked me a question, I'm gonna answer it. And there are 2 ways you can answer that question. I think
Okay.
position in the current Captiva code allows non-conforming buildings, say Sunset Captiva on the condo side, which are higher than 28 feet above base flood elevation, and Bayside villas, et cetera, et cetera. The position that we've been taking is they should be able to build back what they have, incorporating base flood elevation. You may say, if they got over the 50% rule, we don't want them to be able to build back. We say only 28 feet above base flood elevation, but that's not what the position has been. Our position is people, and this is what the Lee County Code says, the intent of the Lee County Code is to let people build back what they have and incorporating the resiliency options. They would continue to be non-conforming. They would even maybe be high as you incorporate the base flood elevation, but they're getting what they have. New construction would be under the current code. But for people who had something before, we're basically saying, yes, you can keep it.
Okay, so you're saying we should waive the 50% rule on build
What?
back.
Say
We
again?
should waive the 50% rule on build backs.
No, the 50% rule, if you're less than 50% rule, you're not treated like a new building. You can just build back even though you're not built out higher. If you're over 50%, you just have to build back incorporating the new base flood elevations as if you,
Mhm.
But you're not required, though, if you're too high, to scale it back down. To
no,
be,
we're saying build
No.
back incorporates the resiliency measures. That's what we're saying.
Not the height.
All right.
And the height, if resiliency, in other words, if say Bayside Villa, let's use that as an example. Say it has its first floor at, first livable floor starts at 12 feet. Let's just use that as an example. And they now they get more than 50% damage. So they have to build back what they had. But now the base flood elevation is 16 feet instead of 12 feet. They can now build 4 feet higher than they did before to get what they had before and be consistent with base flood elevation.
okay, but you don't feel, though, that to build back in compliance with current code requires somebody to reduce their height if their height is beyond what current code is.
That's what
No.
I'm saying. That current code would incorporate base flood elevation, whatever that is. Yes.
What current code, David?
What?
What current code? You said current code
Yeah,
would take,
Current code on Captiva allows you to build 28 feet above base flood elevation, no matter what your base flood elevation is.
you are
That's new.
speaking, hold on, you were speaking about Bayside Villas in your scenario, correct?
Right.
Does Bayside Villas fall under the Captiva code right now?
It does not.
Thank you.
Unless,
Guys, let's not.
unless,
No, but we're dealing with semantics here, and we're skirting
No,
issues,
but
and we're
it's-
making
yeah,
it sound
it's-
like that
it-
it's always 28 feet above BFE, and really it's not. Not in South Sea.
Well,
We're not.
can't we move to
That's
where?
that's our whole position.
No, but let us look at the position that we believe should be there from the panel's viewpoint. And then
So that's what we're trying to make sure we understand, Linda.
I'm trying to figure out what is right now. Linda.
I don't
That's all
think
I'm
that's what Bob
clarifying.
is talking about. Bob is
I'm
talking about
clarifying
what
what
it
is
used
right
to
now.
be.
No, I'm saying what is right now.
Yeah, he's talking about right now versus where we wanted it to be. Versus that's what Bob's talking about.
I'm
And we're
talking
trying to
about if you take a document, you go down to the county right now and you try to pull a permit, South Seas falls under the ADD and they're going to say, sorry, you can't do right now.
I agree that the ADD should be made compliant with the existing Captiva code and the existing land development code of Lee County for build back. And the Lee County build back code should take out that obsolete Captiva provision and put in a new provision which incorporates the 28 feet above base flood elevation and allows all build back to incorporate resiliency measures, including, which would cover Bayside Villas and any other building on South Seas. That has nothing to do with what the county, with the proposal that was submitted before the county commissioners is on the proposal that was submitted has nothing to do with those things. What was submitted by South Seas in conjunction with the county was to raise new buildings up to 75 feet if they requested. So let's get that off the table. And then we will, I agree with you, we should amend it so that South Seas is treated like every other resort on Captiva, and build back incorporates those base flood elevations and other resiliency measures that allow them to build back. That's simple. I can't imagine anybody objecting to it.
I agree with you on that. And let me just add something else, because we're keep on talking about South Seas like those bad people. Okay, and so, but let's talk about Sunset Captiva right now. So I'm just going to give you a real example of what if at Sunset Captiva, that building on the bay side, which is what, 4 or 5 stories high? How tall is it?
3 stories
3.5, but then it's above
Three.
the. right,
above,
same-
yeah,
Right.
from
So if
flood
that
level.
happened, let's just say it burnt down or halfway burnt down, and they needed, now are you going to kick out, one whole story full of homeowners because you can't build back? And I don't think that's the intention any of us want on the island. Of course, we want Bayside, we want them to be able to build back what they had before. And since they lost 4 feet in the new FEMA rule, then give them the additional 4 feet. I think that, I mean, that's a no-brainer for me.
Yeah, yeah.
We just want to take off the table anything that would increase heights in the future. So I think that we're all smart enough people, we can figure this out and
I
get
agree
that off
with
the table. And the
I
and the
agree
county
with
commissioners, they have heard loud and clear from a very united group, all of Sanibel, Captiva. So the one good thing that happened all of this is that we made a real loud voice that no, we don't want the increased heights to that extent. We do want people to be able to rebuild what they had before. So I
Exactly.
think
That's exactly
basically,
right. That's exactly right, Sandy. And in the existing Captiva code, there's a provision of non-conforming structures that allows you to build back. We want to make sure that part of the code incorporates resiliency measures, including base flood elevation, et cetera, just like we had for the 28 feet. And we'd also want South Seas to be covered by that. Yes.
There's also two things to consider. Florida is a very strong property rights state, as you well know. So they're not going to deny somebody what they've got now if it had to be rebuilt. That would be viewed as a taking. That would be a non-starter at the county. Now that they have it written down that way, no, that's a problem. The second thing, as we're talking about the administrative interpretation and the things that need to be done to it, we as a panel can't do anything about the administrative interpretation except describe the ways that it could be amended if the parties involved, which don't include the panel, wish to amend it. Right now, the ADD or the administrative interpretation is between the county, I guess the Timbers as the current property owner of those common properties, and all the homeowners associations. So the panel is not a party to that. We can make suggestions and we can help them try to figure out a way to amend, but that's not something we as a panel could do.
Can we send a letter to the commissioners requesting that this gets updated, and
That was a discussion you'd have with the county attorney's office first. They're the ones who have to start that, look at that and figure out what the steps are.
well, can we, as a panel, say we would like them to do this and it would help clarify and simplify the situation on Captiva?
We can, and I don't think it would make one difference one way or the other. I think it comes down to the parties of the original agreement have to decide that they want to amend it and figure out how to do that. What we as a panel should do is figure out the steps of that, because it's complicated. It's using a process that doesn't exist at the county anymore. Therefore, it's been supplanted by another process. We would need to go through and make sure we understand what the ramifications could be and how the parties could be involved, because this is going to be a multi-part process. That's part of the issue here, is that you're changing part of something before you change the next part of something. And unfortunately, that's the way these rules are structured. The ADD is 20 plus years old, and it was built on a planning document or regimen from the 80s. It's going to take some work to figure out how that gets amended properly.
Look, I think what needs to be understood is that think of ADD as a plan development that was negotiated and worked through with the county and the various property owners on South Seas. At this point, when Blackstone came in and wanted to build a hotel and knock down the employee housing units, they presented a proposal that was accepted by the county because it was consistent with the administrative interpretation. Okay. And so they never even were looking for building heights above the existing administrative interpretation. We are saying to South Seas that if you guys, your owners on South Seas, if you get your act together and you want to change that administrative interpretation so it's consistent with the Captiva code, we will support you completely. And if you want to, right now, that administrative interpretation refers you to the build back provisions of the Lee Development Code. We will say to South Seas, we will support you. And if you want clarity on the build back provisions to allow you to build back, which you have, plus base flood elevation and whatever resiliency measures, we will support you. But you guys got to get your act together and make a decision of how you want to proceed. But whatever you do, you will be consistent with the Captiva code and be treated the same way as everybody else on Captiva. And we will work with you to get that if you think the administrative interpretation provides you less. It's very simple. It's very simple. And Ken Suarez is on the call. He wanted to say something before,
Can-
but
Can we ask Bob and Ken to take an action item to figure out how to do that? And come back with a proposal to us?
I
Even though we
think-
do-
no,
we
I
don't
think,
have-
no, Linda, I think we will continue, we will work this process the way we working it. With the, as I said before, Ken will work with county staff. We will come up with a
I
provision.
meant Ken Suarez, not Ken.
Oh,
Buchanan.
Oh. Well, I don't know. Then you're dealing with, no, I think it's the panel's responsibility as we take the lead to come up with draft proposals that reflect what people said at the public hearing. And then we will have that to the panel. The panel will review it, and then we will bring it to the community.
I'm talking about I was just told that these agreements that are 20 years old, really the panel is not involved in that. Those are South Seas, those are South Seas property owners and Lee County. So I would think that we could ask Bob as a member of the panel and Ken Suarez to come up with proposed changes to those.
Linda, I think we've got to talk through all of the principles, not just the ones dealing with building heights. There's other ones involved here too. I think we've got to reach agreement on, from a panel, what it is we want to have happen. From where I sit right now,
Okay.
it seems we have agreement on building heights.
And
That-
density.
Yeah, yeah, but I think we have agreement on building heights that we want everybody to be able to build back as they were, taking into consideration, flood levels. Did I state that right, David?
Yes, basically, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so then I think,
Sorry, I was just gonna say, that's what Sanibel did too. They basically have that, and Holly texted me and said, that's what Sanibel did, made it much easier. Easy
right,
to understand language.
right. So if you have more floors than what's currently permitted under Captiva building heights, that's okay. You can build back to the building heights that you were at.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay,
I want to be clear because I'm not, I don't want to say we want to do exactly what Sanibel did because I'm not really familiar with that. But I think what we're being clear about is that if your resiliency options require you to go up, you're not going to get squeezed on the top.
right.
You can go up with those
Yeah.
increases below base flood elevation. And I think that's the important thing, is that if you're required to go up for federal, state, or local rules, your height on top goes up equal to that. And I think that that's what's important. And that's what we have for the 28 feet above base flood elevation. And we want that to happen with the build back provisions also. And I think
Right.
it's got to be clear. I don't know about Sanibel, so I don't want to say we want to do.
Yeah, I don't think we want to say same as Sanibel. I think, does anybody on the panel not agree with that position that we should be able to build back?
I
No,
think we
I
should
agree.
I agree, but I would like to see it written down and then have us be able to agree to it next week. That we start having regular meetings so we can talk to each other and then just agree to it.
Mhm.
I think what Jay's trying to do, Linda, is get us on principle, and then Ken
Right.
and the appropriate people he needs to work with will develop a draft proposal to be reviewed by the panel.
Yeah, I want to get us in agreement on what the principles are here.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay,
Yeah,
before we talk
Yeah.
about next steps, what the
Yeah.
panel wants.
yeah.
Okay, so the first thing, I think we've dealt with heights. Now, the next issue is density. All right, so
Mhm.
we have strongly in place throughout Captiva. Let's leave South Seas out of it for a minute. It's 3 units per acre. Okay?
And three hotel units per acre.
And, yeah, 3 hotel units per acre. All right, now, the way county has written it, as I understand it, they've left it in place if for Captiva outside of South Seas at 3 units per acre.
And 3
But-
hotel units per acre.
What?
There's three hotel units per acre and 3 units per acre.
Units per acre, right.
So both those things govern Captiva as we sit here today. The county's proposal just exempts South Seas
From that.
hotel
And we're
units.
saying we don't want that. We don't want South Seas exempted from that.
We want everybody treated the same. That's correct.
Okay, so this will put us in conflict then with Timbers because they want to build back the hotel to more density than what they have, now. And the way I think that's what they want, and I don't know for sure. I think they want all density restrictions, removed.
We haven't proposed anything
no.
on density.
No, both of you are wrong about that.
Okay,
They're not asking for 3 units per acre for non-hotel units to be changed. They have not made that request. 3 units per acre for single family homes or anything else remains the same. What South
is that true in the county, in the county's new
Yes.
write-up?
Yes, in the county proposal, there's 3 units per acre. What South Seas is asking for is to exempt them from the 3 hotel units per acre. When I say South Seas, it's the county proposal. Eliminate South Seas from the 3 hotel units per acre. So therefore, they want to change that. They also want to, and under the proposal that's pending right now, hotel units on South Seas would not be considered a unit for density purposes. So they could ask for any number of hotel units that administrative magistrate or administrative hearing or the county commissioners would be willing to approve. So they could request. So what they're saying now is they have 109 hotel units or 107 hotel units down by the big marina. They had said they want to, they said this to the associations, we would rather have 175 units rather than 109 units. And what they're proposing what's being proposed in the Captiva, in the amendments to the ordinance, is they could ask for that. And that's something that would then be different on South Seas than it would be different at Twin Waters or anywhere else. And that's what the public hearing, people at the public hearing said, is we don't want to increase density, period.
Just to clarify, if you remove hotel units as units, it would probably revert to the county formula now, which is equivalent units based on room size. So for example, if you had,
And I'm not sure that's true for a PD.
well, I'm just using an example. The PDs are on their own, but I'm assuming this would be, I was trying to get more the equivalent part than the actual room size part, that they would be able to have hotel rooms be viewed as less than a unit. So that 2 or 3 hotel rooms might now become a unit, which is how the county views it elsewhere. As David correctly said, plan developments are a whole nother critter.
Yeah, plan developments, density restrictions and size of hotel unit restrictions don't exist outside of the Captiva plan for a plan development under the lead code. So in all fairness to what the lead code would say, if these amendments were made, there's no written restriction on the number of hotel units that could be requested. It would have to be part of a compatibility hearing and et cetera, that would look at open space and all these issues. But right now, under the administrative interpretation and under the Captiva code, the South Seas is limited to 3 hotel units per acre, as is everybody else on South Seas and everybody else on Captiva. That proposal was sought to eliminate South Seas from that restriction. And that's what people were upset about at the public hearing, is why should the 3 hotel units per acre be changed at this point for one property owner?
David, I don't agree with you that everybody understands that this is just about hotel units. I think people understand this to mean that all density limitations are being removed from South Seas, and they can build however many hotel rooms they want. They can put up whatever new condominium buildings they want, etc.
Okay,
Again, Dave, we are governed by the ADD until any of that changes, and none of that can happen. I mean,
Yeah,
no, I
yeah,
understand,
that's
but
what people are.
the county has made it really clear that anything like that to happen, the ADD would have to go away. We'd have to do a rezone. We'd have to go through all those meetings, all those discussions.
Yeah.
And all we're asking for is tell us how we can rebuild at what height. That's all this is right now.
Okay, well, we're telling you what the panel thinks, and what the public hearing said is, we think you should be able to rebuild. We think you should be able to rebuild what you have, and to rebuild what you have with incorporated resiliency measures, including base flood elevation. That's simple.
What you're saying we should have in the future. But right
Yeah.
now, the county is saying we do not have that.
Well, that's because you got administrative interpretation, which you have to amend, and we're saying, because it's your administrative interpretation, and we're saying amend it and be consistent with the Captiva code. Don't change it. Don't make proposals that make it completely different than the Captiva code and eliminate all building heights and eliminate all density requirements. Make a change, propose it consistent with the Captiva code. Right now, the Captiva code says if you comply with the administrative interpretation, you can live by it and the code doesn't apply. But it strongly suggests that if you don't live by that administrative interpretation, the Captiva code applies. And I think you guys thought it applied too. Otherwise, you wouldn't have sought to amend the Captiva code to take out every reference to South Seas. So I think that's what's going on here. So we're saying amend the administrative interpretation. We'll work with you to do it. We'll support you in doing it and make it consistent with the Captiva code and build back provisions that allow you to have full resiliency. I think that's what Sandy said, and that's what everybody's been saying. That's what 100 people said at the public hearing. It's pretty straightforward.
I will disagree 100%. It's pretty straightforward, David.
Okay.
Look at this panel and all the questions.
Well, I think the panel's
Enough
got.
said.
Well, can't we get at least rid of the ambiguity, Bob? Let's get rid of the ambiguity so you don't have to deal with that. Or come up with some proposals that you think we would agree to.
I think we're excited to spend the next few weeks meeting with the owners of South Seas and then meeting with the owners in Captiva and discussing our position on this, as well as the county is going to do that. I think that's where we are right now.
Okay. The other piece of it, and the questions keep popping up, is that one of the county proposals was to add 4 feet to base flood elevation. In other words, it's not on a buildable floor, but to just add 4 feet to base flood elevation if you want to. In other words, if your base flood elevation is 12 feet, say, and you build a livable floor from 12 feet up, over 12 feet, what the county's proposing is maybe the FEMA base flood elevation isn't high enough to deal with storm surge. And so this is what, Michael Jacob was calling a fudge factor. He was saying, why can't we give homeowners the option to build an extra 4 feet below the first livable floor to include up to 4 feet of base flood elevation? And
David, that's the first, that additional 4 feet, you cannot use that for your overall height. That just means you can raise the base elevation by 4 feet before you start having your first living floor.
Correct, but then your house will be 4 feet higher on the top end.
Right, but it doesn't give you an additional story. It just gives you more clearance
before your first floor.
Yes.
It gives you 4 more feet in building height. If you go up 4 in your base flood elevation, you get 4 more feet at the top. The building envelope stays the same and just moves up 4 feet.
Right.
Okay,
Yeah,
right.
it's just protecting you from storm surge. That's all you,
Right.
it is
It
protection.
doesn't give you additional, height of living space.
That is correct.
Okay.
Right.
That stays the same. So the
Right.
question we can ask ourselves, do we have any objection?
I don't think we do.
Right.
No.
We can talk about whether or not, and it's discretionary. It doesn't have to be, you can ask for it, you can get it automatically. You can ask for 2 feet, 3 feet, up to 4 feet. So I think that we can support that if people feel that that FEMA heights may not be sufficient to protect against storm surge on these barrier islands.
Hey, Dave, I thought I saw Greg Spencer say that the flood elevation's 18 feet, 18 and a half feet now, federal flood elevations, 18 and a half feet.
It's different in different places, John, but whatever it is, it is. So if your base flood elevation is 18 feet, you got 28 feet above the 18 feet.
Yeah, unless it's non-conforming, then you can
And-
build back. On
Then you
top
can go
of
back. That's
No,
right.
if you, even if it's non-conforming, you have to comply with the base flood elevation.
Right.
So
but
if
you
it
can
go,
build-
if it's gone up, you have to go up.
If you're over the
You don't
50%,
have to stick to the 28 feet.
right. Say again?
Right.
No,
Yeah.
you still have to stick to the 28 feet, but you're allowed,
I
you have
mean-
to, you go up higher from your base flood elevation. That is a federal setting.
Yeah, and that's new construction.
New construction. That's correct.
Yeah.
Or build back.
Build back.
New
would-
construction.
Build back has nothing to do with the 28 feet. Build back,
Right.
build back what you have incorporating base flood elevation is what we're saying.
Yep, yep.
Okay, are we all agreed on adding 4 feet to the base flood elevation?
I think it's the way it's drafted now, Jay, it's a homeowner may request 1, 2, 3, up to 4 feet to add to their base flood elevation
Okay.
without having to get a variance.
All right, however, the county states it now, do we agree with that? That we don't have an issue with that?
I don't, Frank, I don't know about,
Yeah.
but I don't have an issue with it. I think we'd have to hear from our stakeholders, et cetera. But I think that is not unreasonable. But I think we might want to add a caveat. It doesn't mean people can build living space down there on the
Right.
feet. Yeah, I think that we have to do. We don't want to just add 4 feet to give people room to put in a theater and everything else. What you have to remember is when we had the storm surge, we have all this debris that was piled up on the streets in Sanibel and Captiva. Much of it came out of basically building below in the base flood elevation area. And a lot of debris removal was based on furniture and rooms and toilets.
Absolutely, yeah. We all know that, right?
Yeah,
The
so that's a
people build
problem.
that out.
And one of
Yeah,
the
so-
things to remember is that the other reason you want to tie stuff to base flood elevation is that is always a moving standard. They resurvey that essentially probably roughly every 10 years. So that's why you have different buildings at different elevations, because those numbers change.
Right,
I'm guessing that after something like Ian, the numbers are going to change again. They happen to change right after the storm, but that was something that was started years ago. So in the wake of Ian, it's not going to be immediate, but you will be seeing changes in base flood elevation once more. And there are people who are asking about properties that are outside of the base flood. You're outside now, you may not be the next time. I mean, there were some bayfront properties that used to have to be elevated. The last resurveying by Dewberry took that out and they could build at ground level, which was insane, frankly, but that's what the federal government allowed. Now, I'm guessing the next time this happens, that will go away and you'll be elevating at some point. So if that's the case, it would kick in. There was a question about whether we could give it to them even now. That's a question of whether there's a way to write that language that isn't so confusing no one will get through it. But we can certainly see if it's possible.
And then I wanted to bring one more thing up, because when you had buildings that were built 40 years ago, a typical ceiling height was what, 8 feet? What was
yes,
And then now today's standards, if you're going to be building a hotel unit or a condo or whatever, I would think that you'd want at least minimum 10 feet. So are we going to suggest that in this plan, or are we just gonna stick to how many stories?
28 feet was chosen at that time above base flood elevation to give people very high, relatively high ceilings at that point.
That's
Because,
what I'm asking.
yeah, it was. I mean, it does. And people who build now at 28 feet above base flood elevation have pretty good ceiling heights.
Okay, good.
Yeah, I mean, it could have done 20 feet, but they did 20. If it was 8-foot ceilings, it would have been 16 feet. If it was 10-foot ceilings, you know what I mean? So 28 feet is good ceiling heights.
Well, you remember, that's 28 feet to the midpoint of the roof.
That's right.
And
That's
you've
right.
got to also account for the thickness of each floor, which is about 1.5 feet.
Right.
So with 28 feet, people wind up, having to, shave off the top of their roofs, to bring the height down.
I know. And the thing is because if you like, I mean, well, the contemporary designs are flat roofs, but if you're
Yeah.
really going to hold true to some of the more island looks, it has a little bit more of a peak to a roof. And that's all. That's the only reason why I was asking. I'm not even voicing an opinion. I'm just sending it out there.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Sandy.
Mhm.
Well, part of county's recommendation was to go from 28 to 35, right, David?
It wasn't, well, what they were doing is they're saying it's 35 everywhere in the county. So why does not apply to South Sea, to Captiva also? And yeah, so they were basically adding the potential, depending on how you build, a third floor above for the 3 stories instead of 2 stories. That's correct.
Okay, but the way it stands right now with what county's written and what we have in place is we're base elevation plus 28 feet. The county wants us to be base elevation plus 35 feet. Is that correct?
I don't think that when you say the county wants, I think that's what's in the proposal right now.
Yeah.
I think the county and the commissioners understand that what we went through with our changing the building heights on Captiva, when we did that, when we changed it back then, a number of years ago, that's something that Captiva wanted. They vetted it. They went through community workshops. They sent out letters to property owners. I don't think frankly, I don't think they're looking to raise us to 35 feet anymore. I think they,
Okay, but it is 35 feet now, the way it's written.
In the rest of the county.
it's the way it's written in their proposal, it would change us from 28 to 35. That's
Right.
correct.
All right, are we saying we don't want that?
That's,
want to
yes,
stay at 28
that's
feet.
what we're saying. We want to keep it the same is what I think what we're saying. Yes.
And what my thought was, is part of the whole long-term plan for the island, Captiva is so diverse. You have the village where you have 50-foot wide lots. And then you have the Gold Coast and you have, 200-foot wide lots, et cetera. And so, so if we were going to go down the road, I'm just going to say, I don't think we should do a one size fits all. It should have something to do with the size of the lot that you're on and that type of thing. And that gets into much more complicated language if you really want to look at it that way. But so if you want to keep it simple, probably keeping it the way it is now is probably the simplest way. And
Yeah.
then if we wanted to look into something a little bit more expansive, so if you have this huge piece of property on the waterfront, you should be able to have a beautiful structure with very peaked roofs and make it an architectural beauty, which you can't do currently. Right now, you're making trade-offs every step of the way.
Right,
But I don't think we want to get into that now.
I would agree.
okay. So are we all in favor of base elevation plus 28 feet? Having stay where we are now?
Oh, I don't think we have a choice. I don't think when we changed that, it took us over a year to get the community to change that. We had a big debate between the village and the rest of Captiva. I think that was the compromise that everybody was willing to live with. Some people in the village weren't happy with it, but I think it was the right thing to do. And it turned out with sea level rise and all that, it was the right thing to do.
Okay.
So,
Does anybody on the panel object to staying with 28 feet?
Mm-mm. No,
Okay,
no.
all right, well, I think we have agreement then from the panel that the direction we should be moving in is base elevation plus up to 4 feet plus 28 feet for building heights.
That's correct.
Okay? And we want to keep the density the same as it is now,
Correct.
regular units and hotel rooms.
Correct.
Okay. The only possible exception I could see to that is, should there be any flexibility on allowing South Seas to expand the number of hotel rooms that they have now?
I don't see any basis for doing that for one property owner. I really don't, Jay.
Right, so you object to that because it would be precedent setting.
It would be precedent setting and it would be unfair to the other hotels. And
Right.
what would happen, I think, to be honest, is that eventually the other hotels would have a very strong case for saying, why should we be excluded from that increased density? We wanted to, and I think the county commissioners would be hard pressed to deny that once the other one property owner has it. So I
Right.
think it opens the door to increased density throughout Captiva. And I think it would then even put pressure on Sanibel to increase density. And to do this after a hurricane and when we want to be more resilient makes no sense to me.
Well, it certainly doesn't have anything to do with resiliency to add hotel rooms.
It does not.
No. Okay, is there anybody that disagrees with just maintaining current density for all of Captiva? And not permitting any density exemptions, which is the way our code is written now.
I mean,
No.
it's hard to, I mean, because we don't know what they're thinking, it's hard to
Yeah, right.
support it, right? Like if this was, they want 3 more units or something, it'd be kind of a different story. If it's like they want 100 more. So I struggle without knowing what we're exactly voting on, but.
Well, I think you're voting on a principle that you don't want to give one party the opportunity to add hotel rooms that you're not giving to everyone else on Captiva.
For sure, I agree with that.
And I think, Bruce, that part of the problem has been, I don't want to ask backwards, I guess what there were changes being made in the code and the plan before we knew what it is people really wanted. And then we hear Bob Walter honestly saying, oh yeah, we understand that the code provision allows for 75 feet, but we really didn't want that. Or yeah, we agree it allows for unlimited hotel rooms in a PD, but we really didn't want that. So, I mean, the question is, if a PD comes in and they need to be some deviation or variance that is not unreasonable, we'll have the opportunity to deal with it at that time.
Yeah.
Right,
I
exactly.
think what we're being asked to do right now is to agree to these in principle.
Yes,
And what's going to happen and to the best of our knowledge, to follow what we're what we're agreeing to. Then what's going to happen is shortly, these principles will be written down and we'll be able to see them, and then we'll agree to them in
yes,
reality.
yeah,
Okay. That's it.
okay, so,
Jay, maybe we can ask James Evans and Ken Suarez just to weigh in here, both of them, since they were
oh yeah, absolutely, of course.
they were so active in the coalition with us. and
Yes,
Community
yes,
organized.
do they agree with our principles that we've, can I hear from James and Ken Suarez?
Yeah, Jay, thanks. Yeah, no, we support the principles, and I agree with David. It's tough to know, to voice support for something where we don't know what the goal is. If we knew what the density could be, and the issues with height, aside from just building back what they have following the storm, it's hard to know exactly how we can meet their needs if we don't know what their needs are. And then I heard Bob mention that they were looking for parking plus 3, and I assume that was just for the buildings that are currently non-conforming, and it would be really helpful if I knew that.
Again, James, we don't have any plans. I think Greg has made it clear in several public comments, and I think in some news medias that he's done, that parking plus 3 exists out there at South Seas
Yeah.
right now. That's what why can't we do that? I
Okay.
think that's where that comment came out.
Great. Okay. Yeah, no, I just wanted that for clarity here.
We don't have any
But
plans.
I think the discussion this morning has been good. We definitely need to make some changes to make sure that, you know, you can build back in the spirit of what you currently have. There's no question about that. We support that. And, you know, I think that, you know, keeping the building height, you know, in the rest of Captiva, you know, at 28 feet above base flood elevation, to make sure that, you know, you can build back, you know, what you had prior to the storm, I think is also in keeping in the spirit of what we would like to see. So
Okay,
thank you guys for having this discussion this morning. I think it's been really helpful.
good.
And I look forward to having conversations with the folks at the Timbers Group and the Captiva Community Panel and Sanibel as we move forward to try and get this resolved and get community support for the project. Thanks.
Okay, Ken Suarez, do you want to pipe in here if you're still with us?
Sure. And first, I wanted to sort of respond to Linda's statement earlier. Our group feels we're just as part of the community as anybody else. And that's why, you know, the process going forward should never change into just us negotiating with the owners of the resort. So I wanted to address that. We feel no different than you guys outside the gates, but we do agree in principle with what you're trying to do here. And, you know, oftentimes the density issue gets kind of left in the corner with all of this. But I also want to let you know that we have heard sort of different ideas of what the resort wants to do actually from the resort. And you may not have a plan, but you do have an idea. And so we have heard that, you know, the parking +1 or, you know, means an elevated parking area, then you go up. That's what we have actually heard. So, you know, it's such a simple solution to write language that's everybody can understand about being able to rebuild if your structure is breaches the current building code and conflicts with the administrative interpretation. Obviously, it's a very simple solution. It's just writing language saying that, yes, you can build back to what you currently have. I was taken aback a little bit by the deputy county attorney because he doesn't even understand this, okay? And I pressed him on it on multiple occasions, and I've gotten 3 different answers from him. So it's such a complicated situation because the words are so complicated. And if we can just nail that down, then you're going to give a whole lot of owners inside the resort comfort that they'll be able to build back if there's a catastrophic event to their building.
I agree with that completely.
Yeah, I think that's clearly what the intent of the panel is, Ken, is to allow that based on our discussion today.
And I also think it's in the intent of the existing Lee County Development Code, and I think it's consistent with the intent of the Captiva build back for non-conforming building code. And, you know, but they were written before there were certain hurricanes, and I think we just need to clarify it and make the language consistent with the intent of the original drafters. And I think that can be done quite simply. And that's what I meant before. Yeah. This is not that complicated.
Can I say one more thing? You know, if there's one thing I really was educated on and learned from this experience is that the county commissioners really do not understand the resort, and they need to be educated further. In the little time I spent with them, I did my best to educate them with a map and whatnot, but they really were not understanding the entire landscape of the resort. And that's going to be very important going forward.
Thank you, Ken. Go ahead, Jay.
All right, so I think we've agreed upon principles. I don't know, Ken, can you draft what we've agreed to?
Sure. David and I will be working on, we'll go through and develop some language for you all so that we can discuss at the July meeting. That way you'll
Well, I
have
think we
something
need to
specific
meet
in front of you.
sooner- We probably need to meet sooner than July, I would think.
I would like to suggest, so that we can get full involvement of the panel, and that we're within sunshine, that we have regularly scheduled meetings once a week, which we can cancel if we don't have anything to talk about. I would like to know what's going on. I would like to be part of the discussions, and I think other panel members would too.
I have a problem with Ken schedules a panel meeting every Tuesday at 9 o'clock and we cancel them as we need them. As we don't need them. I'm not sure we'll have something by next Tuesday.
Yeah, I think you got to give us a little bit of time to get,
Yeah.
because what I'd like to do is, I mean, we've identified these areas, but I want to go back through the land development code and see what other glitches we might discover that also need to be fixed, like the contradictory height language that's in place. Do they have other stuff written in there that would have an unintended consequence with what we're trying to accomplish?
All right,
So I
well,
don't, I just don't want to do those one sections. I want to be able to look at the whole, look at other sections and make sure we get everything to be consistent this time, so there is less conflict.
There may be other things we should be talking about in terms of steps as well.
Perhaps, but let's start with the ones we've got. If we can get all those nailed down.
Can we
And-
talk about them? I mean, for example, do we have a timeline? I would like to see a timeline.
A timeline in terms of getting this developed. I think we need to
What
have,
the heck is happening between now and September?
I think to give you a one to start tearing apart, I think by
No,
July,
I don't
No.
want the timeline from you.
no, we need to think about that though. If you want it, let's have a quick discussion. We need to have language that we can start to say, come to agreement on by the July meeting, even if we work on it beforehand at July, to try to be able to say, this is what the panel would endorse. Then we have the time to go out to the community, to our other coalition partners, and to the other communities, because a lot of these things that we're looking at are just not Captiva only.
Right.
If we want to revise the build back policy, that's everybody, or at least every coastal community. We would want them to be engaged. We want to do what should have been done with the language that we got from the county this time. We want to make sure it's vetted. We want to make sure it has input. So I would say we'd need to accomplish that during July to August, so that we, by early to mid-August, we'd have something we could start talking to staff with.
Well, perhaps somebody besides David, because David is busy. David's doing everything.
yeah.
Perhaps another panel member could be working on this.
Yes, I think the panel members need to divvy up some of these responsibilities. David and I can draft language, but if you know people to reach out to, if you have to want to engage other stakeholders, this is time to raise your hand and say, I'll do this.
But can I go through a bunch of things rather than we solve each one about things I think we perhaps should consider doing? Is that okay? I think we need a timeline. I know that I would assume that South Seas being South Seas is engaging teams to help be PR teams on all of this. My guess is they would probably be doing that. Should we be engaging a PR team for us?
I think, let me say two things. I think we skimmed over before and I mentioned it, but we didn't discuss it. I think we need to retain
I'm not there yet, David. Okay, I think we need lawyers. We need a legal team.
Okay, if we're gonna continue discussing for a while, let's take a 5-minute break, okay?
Yeah, there's
We've been at this 2 hours.
we need to do, and then the question is this the right set of things that we should be doing or not? I don't know.
Okay, let's be back in 5 minutes, okay?
Okay.
David,
Yes,
we may want to reconsider the Tuesday morning meetings for the next 2 weeks because next week we may not have something and the following week, Tuesday is the 4th of July. And I'm
All right.
guessing no one's going to meet.
right. So I have to pick another day. Yeah.
So like next week, let's do it later in the week and then it buys a little bit of time.
Yeah, we need a little time to do this right.
Mhm.
And, like we say, it's going to be an initial draft reflecting the principles, and then we're going to get a lot of input from a lot of people that we have to be, but that we will incorporate in these things.
Yes.
But Linda's two things that she said, she didn't want me to interrupt, but I thought she wanted reaction. Public relations and land use attorneys, something we have to get approval to go forward if we want to do that.
And if we want, well, let's wait till everybody's back. Okay.
Mhm.
And my belief is we should probably, I mean, we may have had enough for right now. And that we tee up some of these to be discussed at the next meeting.
Well, wait till people come back, but I do think we need to, we do have an attorney that we've been working with. And the attorney involvement, I think, will increase at this point, and we need to see whether he can continue to do this or whether we have to retain somebody else.
I thought his work was excellent.
Well, my understanding that David basically wrote that and he signed it.
Okay, David, you're a great lawyer.
This is all unsubstantiated, and I refuse
Okay,
to say anything about this.
all right.
That was I thought that was an excellent.
All right, but we do
Okay.
need a level of expertise that we don't have at this point.
Yes.
And so I think we need to talk about retaining an attorney, not just for us, but for the coalition, and there may be different interests that may require more than one attorney.
Okay.
And to decide, and we can talk about it, whether we need a public relations assistance.
So
Okay, David, one thing I don't understand is why do you and Ken have to redraft language as opposed to us just working with our principals and getting county staff to draft the language?
Because just like we drafted our community plan, and just like we drafted our land development code, and just like we drafted the ordinances, we draft it, and then the county basically responds and tweaks it. If we leave it to the county, we would just get what we already got proposed.
Okay, so we cannot count on them. An outcome, it's not reasonable to expect that we would get the commissioners to direct county staff to rewrite the regulations as reflecting the principles that the Captiva Community Panel has stated clearly and gotten endorsement from throughout the community.
That's it. They won't do that. The county attorneys won't do that. We have to provide them language. The
Okay.
attorneys won't work
I
for
think my
us.
question's answered.
Yeah,
So
Can we get an attorney? So you feel you two have to rewrite that, or is that a job for an attorney to do?
well, I think we can. Ken's pretty good at this, and I've learned a lot over the last couple of months, and I think we can do that in conjunction with a land use attorney who we have on retainer now. But I think we might need additional legal assistance. So I think we should talk about getting permission to review, talk to some attorneys and see who's available. Right.
Okay, well, yeah, you have that now up to $25,000, right?
Right. So I just want people to know that we're going to, because Linda raised it, I think we need to bring in the best.
I think the very, very best.
I agree. Very, very best.
Okay, are we beginning?
I guess, I think so. I think we can resume the meeting. I don't know if everybody's back. I imagine maybe some people have signed off and some people had to go.
Okay, so here, let me start off again with the list I have so far of things that we should consider. And I'm going to start in a different order. Should we formalize a coalition with all of these other key stakeholders, such as even our little Alva and Pine Island and Sanibel and SCCF and is there some way that we should have a more formal group that we do that with? I don't know the right answer, and I don't think we're going to come up with the answer in the next few minutes, but that's
Well,
one.
in an ideal world, I agree with that, but I don't know how we
Well, maybe we should
do that.
Maybe we should think about that.
Okay.
Okay. 2, do we need a PR firm and a PR strategy?
I don't think so, because this is we know what the will of the people is. And
But if we're going to have a PR firm and strategy by South Seas, do we need to be ready for that and be ready to have things in magazines or newspapers or whatever, or do we just sit there and say, yeah, that's right?
We
Well,
have
we're
a
not
very,
gonna
we have a
sit there.
very short turnaround time, Linda. I don't think PR is going to be a major player here.
yeah,
Well, I
I mean,
think
the
we
stuff-
should talk about it, and we should also see if there's people within the community who excel at this kind of thing and who'd want to do it, if somebody wanted to volunteer.
My
the
understanding,
community is 100% on our side right now. I don't know what we need a PR firm for. The only people we need to convince are the commissioners.
Okay, well then how are we going to do that?
yeah, let me just say, I think James Evans and SCCF have been working with public relations firms, and they're extremely good at this, and they may have something to say about this because they're handling a lot of the public outreach.
Okay, so why don't we put that on and talk to James about that next week, since he's oh, there he is, but he might be quiet.
Right.
A legal team that is not just us, but Sanibel, I'm sure, is interested. Pine Island's interested. Everybody's interested. So we have to figure out how to have a legal team that's effective. I don't know how. Okay.
Yeah. Yep, I agree.
Next, regular meetings. I think we sort of agreed to that. Should we have a committee with Sanibel to start working on what might be the potential for merging with Sanibel in some aspects if things go south in September? So do we have contingency plans for that? I don't know. Okay, I'm just telling you what my items are. Should we have start fundraising in a concerted effort with other communities to pay for legal and whatever else we need to do? What?
Do you want us not to respond until you go through your whole list?
Well, I don't know if we need to talk about them all today, okay? I don't know, I don't want, maybe we should, this is a list. Should we talk about them next week? Should we do it today? I don't care. But I thought I'd like to go through them, and then if we want to talk about them now, we can go and start talking about them. At the panel meetings each week, should we be pulling in people to talk with us, either partners or South Seas or whatever, as part of our regular meetings, such that the panel as a group can react to it and discuss things with them? That's it. So those are my thoughts about potential next actions. I don't know what you want to do, Jay.
Well, clearly we need legal counsel. We've all agreed to that. We have, 25,000 appropriated for it now. And as I understand the panel finances, we can afford that now. I have no idea what these fees might start, running to.
My understanding is that the CCA has spoken with some of their members about creating a legal fund.
Uh-huh.
I've gotten a number of texts and emails, I think, from people who want to contribute to the legal fund. I think that working with Ken, we'll reach out to attorneys and we'll figure out what we need and what we don't need. But I think at this stage of the game, we should hold off a lot of this discussion until we see what lawyers are available, additional lawyers are available, if we need a lawyer. And then we can talk to some of our coalition, Ken can talk to some of our coalition partners and, others can, to see what role they would take in all of this.
Okay, can we define right now who our coalition partners are that we want to work with? It's clearly Captiva Civic Association, SCCF.
The homeowners and condominium associations,
Sanibel at Captiva, right? Ken Suarez's group.
the city of Sanibel,
Sanibel.
right?
Fort Myers Beach.
No, they don't.
No, they're incorporated.
Who was the one who stood up from Fort
Pine-
Myers?
That was Pine Island.
Well, there's Pine Island, but there's a Fort Myers something or other, I guess. Well, okay, Pine Island and Alva.
My
Yes.
feeling on that is if you start drawing people into that, then you've got to spend time getting to know them. And then you've got other viewpoints that you've got to address and consider. I think we stick with the 5 key ones. Which are us, CCA, the homeowners group at Captiva or South Seas, Sanibel, and SCCF.
I think if we need to reach out to other coastal communities, we can do that on a one-off and say, here's what we're thinking about with the build back clause. We'd like you to know about it before we take it to county staff. But we don't need to make them part of an ongoing coalition. We just need to make sure that they are apprised as to what we're thinking about.
I mean, yeah, there's an extensive list of organizations that have joined with us to vote no on the existing. I mean, we got the Chapel by the Sea. We got, the same.
Well, there's certainly a list of organizations we would
Right.
keep apprised of what we're doing and sending,
That's right.
communications to.
Exactly.
But I don't know that we have to have them attend weekly meetings or something.
No. Okay.
Yeah, but I do think we should, talking strategy at this point, I think we should stop pretty much. And we have the principles, and then we can have Ken work on a timeline and a set of strategic options later on as we move forward. But I don't know if we want to do any more of that right now. But I think Linda's raised all the key points
Right.
that Ken needs to consider in developing a timeline. When from Ken Goodham and a potential strategy.
All right, do we want to set a next panel meeting now?
Yes, and I don't think we can do it on Tuesdays because we need more time for next week, and the Tuesday after the next Tuesday is the 4th of July. So there's not going to be a meeting. No one's going to meet then.
Yeah.
So I think let's look later in next week and see what would work for
Okay,
a,
I know I am totally unavailable next week. I'm going to be in a place where I can't even do Zoom meetings.
Fishing.
You want
to tell them that you're on one of those spaceships to Mars and to just.
Well, actually, I'm going down to visit the Titanic and they.
Okay, so why don't we go ahead and have the meeting and let the vice chairman run it? Is that okay, Jay?
That's, I
What
guess.
What are we talking about? When are we talking?
When are we going to have our next meeting?
Well, our normally scheduled meeting is July 11th. Right?
It seems like a long time. I mean, because we are bound by sunshine. That's the big issue. That's why the panel has all these workshops and we have regularly scheduled things where the people can come in and talk to each other.
Did I get that wrong? The next panel meeting is July 11th, right?
Would be July 11th.
That's correct.
Correct.
now
Yeah.
we can try to set something for the latter part of next week if you'd like to see what draft language can be developed by then.
I would like that.
Okay, I will not be able to attend that meeting, but that doesn't necessarily mean we can't have it. I guess David could run the meeting.
So we either do it Thursday or Friday next week.
That doesn't give us a lot of time to do the work that we need to do, frankly.
Okay.
How about
May-
July 5th?
I would
May I
say,
say something?
Yeah,
Just show some progress. You don't have to do everything, just show some progress.
who's talking?
That's
Kate.
Kate.
I think it's Marguerite, right?
Kate
Yeah.
signed, Kate is the other Captiva Community Panel sign in.
Yeah, okay, so why don't we, I mean, I don't have a problem with, how about like Wednesday the 5th?
Yeah, I can do that.
So can I.
Does that sound all right to you, Linda? So let's schedule a date for the 5th. If we need it, we have it. If we don't, we meet on the 11th.
Okay. And your objective, David, for the meeting on the 5th will be to have the draft language. You and Ken.
I think we want to flush out the best we can, as quick we can, the principles that we're talking about, to identify those areas that have to be adjusted to reflect those principles. And to the extent that we can develop language, that would be great. To the extent that we need to consult with attorneys to have them develop language with us, we'll give a report about where we are on that.
Okay,
I would
and
like to also cover the overall high-level strategy, where we are on these different points, such as legal counsel, PR, blah, blah, blah. And the timeline. And we may not have anything, then let's figure out how to get it done, rather than, right now, this basically all goes through two people who are very good and you're wonderful guys, but sort of resource limited.
We'll get you a timeline and we can talk about strategy on the 5th.
okay, and you would also have a report on who our attorney should be.
We're going to try to do that. We'll meet with our existing counsel, who's been counsel to the coalition of SCCF, the homeowners association,
Right.
the CCA, and us. And then we'll figure out a way to go at this point. Yeah.
Okay.
Can we also ask James to talk about communications, et cetera, in PR?
Well, Ken is going to have to, Ken Goodham will do a lot of this work. Right.
Mhm.
Do we need to give Ken any more money? He just charges on a per hour basis?
He doesn't charge on a per hour basis, but we can.
Let's talk about that when we figure out what we're doing.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, all right, so Ken, you're gonna put out a summary of the principles, right, that we agreed to?
Mhm.
And also announce that that we're gonna have a meeting on July 5th.
Yep.
Okay, I think we are ready to adjourn. It looks like many of our comrades have already adjourned. So anybody have an objection to adjourning?
We have 39 people on the call with us now, and Ken,
Okay. Oh, we should take any public comment. I'm sorry. Thanks for reminding me of that. Do we have any public comment?
There have been a number of comments, some of which we've addressed. Let me run through the list real quick. A number of citations of things that Greg Spencer has been quoted as saying elsewhere, which I won't go through. Excuse me. Clarification that when Linda was talking about the city attorney, she really meant the county attorney.
Yes.
The question about the 5 buildings that Blackstone received permission to build when they were owners, that development order is still active. I don't know what the plans are beyond that, but at least the development order is in place. And I think that's sufficient in terms of comments.
yeah, let me just say something about that while we're here. That development order where Blackstone came to the panel and came to the public was approved by the by the County Community Development Department and by the administrative judge, the magistrate. And it was approved because, and I'm going to read this, does not increase density or intensity of development, does not decrease buffers or open space required by the Land Development Code, does not reduce total open space, buffering, landscaping, or preservation areas, and does not adversely impact on surrounding land uses. And that's why that Blackstone proposal was accepted, because it was consistent with the administrative interpretation at that point. And I just wanted you to know that. The second thing I just wanted to say is, some of this is very confusing, and this debate is very useful. We're doing it out in public, and it's not always the smoothest and prettiest, but we're getting there. We had coalition partners and people participating in this process, formally and informally, involving dozens and dozens and dozens of organizations. It's been basically an experience that I've never had before. And it was an amazing process that involves so many people who are so unified. And even though it's difficult and sometimes messy, I think this community deserves all the congratulations in the world, because I've never seen two communities, Captiva and Sanibel, come together so quickly.
Rise up like this, yes.
It was really unbelievable. And to the point that we even got Pine Island involved, commenting and being supportive. So I think that we take away from this the fact that this community cares about this community. This community cares about these islands, and they're going to protect it. They're going to protect these islands. That's, I think, the takeaway here.
I would also say that discussions such as this and some of the things that have been accomplished in the last, has it been 2 weeks? Is a good example of why this works. I mean, had the county gone through these steps before this language was brought to the commissioners, they would have had a much smoother process. I know that the deputy county attorney always says, but we had our hearings. But if you don't get the public input and you don't get people looking at this critically and saying, but wait, what does this mean? Wait, how does this apply to me? It doesn't, you don't really get the true grasp of some of this language. And I think that's a flaw in the county process that we can hopefully fix through this. I don't know that we'll fix the county process otherwise, but that's not my problem. I think this shows us how we make the language for Captiva better, by having people involved as it's being drafted, looking at it and saying, shaking it and saying, how does this work?
Yep, those are all great comments. I agree with them 100%. The one other item that occurred to me, is there any way we can learn about next steps that the commissioners want to do? For example, I know Kevin Ruane wants to have meetings. I'm not sure what that means, who he wants to have meetings with, what the format of that would be.
Yeah. He said that he wants 2 meetings at least on Sanibel and 2 meetings at least on Captiva. I think we should work with commissioner and county staff to make those things happen.
Yes, absolutely.
So I think we do what we have to do, that we discussed today, and then we fully participate and encourage those meetings to take place.
Right, I agree with that. Well, to the extent you can get any feedback from Commissioner Wayne as to when he wants those meetings and what kind of format they're in, that would be helpful, David.
I will try, for sure.
Okay, well, David and Ken, I cannot tell you how much I appreciate the work both of you have put into this the past 2 weeks. It's truly amazing what you two have done for the community. David, I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
My pleasure, actually.
Okay, I think we are adjourned, and we'll look for the summary of the principles, and then our next meeting will be July 5th. Thank you very much, everybody.
All right,
Take care.
thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.